Though Albert DeSalvo confessed to murdering 13 women in the early 1960s, some believe that the Boston Strangler was really multiple serial killers. Hello viewers, in this video, we'll tell the chilling true story of Albert DeSalvo, the career criminal who confessed to being the Boston Strangler. So, let's get started the video. When readers of the Boston Herald's Sunday edition opened their papers on July 8, 1962, they got a paper with a startling headline: Mad Strangler Kills for Women in Boston. The article warned that a mad strangler is loose in Boston who has slain for women during the past month. Several women in the greater Boston area called the police in a panic, saying a man claiming to be the strangler had called their homes to tell them he will be next. Already, Boston had reason to fear. Still, it was unable to predict the exact size of the challenges. The Phantom Fiend and Phantom Strangler, as well as the Mad Strangler, were not finished yet. According to the local press, 13 women would reportedly die at the hands of the same person between June 1962 and January 1964. When a guy by the name of Albert DeSalvo eventually admitted to all 13 killings, many believed the inquiry was over. However, there has been decades-long disagreement regarding the truth of the man's confession. Was the Boston Strangler actually just one person? Or did many murderers commit the 13 killings? The Boston Strangler's crimes. Despite the fact that all of the Boston Strangler's victims were unmarried, their profiles weren't very similar. The oldest victim was 85 years old, and one was only 19 years old. While some lived in Boston, others were in Salem, Lynn, and Lawrence, which were located far to the north. They were seamstresses and students, widows and divorced women. These file photos show 8 of the victims of the Boston Strangler. The women are upper left to lower right: Rachel Lazarus, Helen E. Blake, Ida Erga, Mrs. J. Delaney, Patricia Bissett, Daniela M. Saunders, Mary A. Sullivan, Mrs. Israel Goldberg. Police believed that the crimes were probably committed by one person from the beginning. The women were nearly always raped and strangled, generally while wearing nylon stockings. This was the unique method of operation that was involved in so many of the crimes. Throughout the day, a lot of people were killed. When the police found the victims, they would be found naked, wrapped over their bed coverings. Strangely, it didn't seem like the strangler broke into any of the residences where the victims lived. As a result of this, the authorities concluded that the women knew who had attacked them. It's more likely that the women knew about his arrival or had thought he was someone they could trust. The offender might have adopted the appearance of a delivery person or repairman. The next chapter. Despite the fact that the crimes were mostly committed outside of Boston's city borders, the public named the enigmatic perpetrator the Boston Strangler. This created problems for Suffolk County prosecutors and the Boston police. Management of law enforcement actions was taken up by Massachusetts Attorney General Edward Brooke, who went on to become the first African American to be elected to the U.S. Senate by popular vote. After months of investigation and thousands of suspect interviews, both the public and the police were desperate for an end to the investigation. The police requested the help of a Dutchman named Peter Herkos, who claimed to have extraordinary senses, or ESP, at the request of a group of private persons who offered to cover the costs. Herkos's talent was described by Brooke as psychometry in a prepared statement. Herkos examined photos of the crime scenes, concluded that one person was responsible for all of the killings, and even led authorities to a single suspect. Herkos also provided assistance with the Manson family murders investigation. When the suspect was brought into custody by the police, it was discovered that he was too mentally ill to stand trial. Boston women were sure to lock their doors in the interim. They purchased pepper spray, deadbolts, and chains. Women who had received uncertain phone calls or unwanted knocks on their doors flooded police stations with calls. A few of them even left the city. What do you do about the door when you enter? One woman asked The Atlantic. You look in the closets, under the bed, and in the bathroom. If a man is in there, you want to be able to run out, screaming for help. Therefore, you should leave the door open. But if you leave the door open while you are making a search, what is to prevent the strangler from following you in and standing between you and your means of escape when you first see him? Do you enter the apartment, lock the door, and then start searching? Or do you leave the door unlocked or open and make a hurried search? The entire city was paralyzed by fear of the Boston Strangler. Some evil guys prospered even though the police were constantly on the lookout for others. Among these criminals was the Green Man, who started his killing spree in Boston and proceeded to terrorize cities in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. More than 400 burglaries and more than 300 sexual assaults on women are alleged to have been carried out by the Green Man, who got his nickname from the green clothing he would wear while performing his crimes. Searches for the Green Man were conducted independently, with a task team looking into the Boston Strangler case. A 20-year-old Cambridge woman reported being sexually assaulted to the police in October 1964. She informed them that, when she had awoken, a man had been in her bedroom. He assaulted her while tying her up and wielding a knife. He released her shackles after she claimed that they were too tight. The police recognized parallels between her attacker and another criminal with a history of sexual deviance after she assisted them in drawing a sketch of him. Although the police called the criminal Albert DeSalvo, they knew him as the Measuring Man. The Measuring Man started committing crimes in the late 1950s. He would approach young women door to door, posing as a talent scout for the black and white modeling agency. He would want to measure them and give them a quick touch. After being apprehended by police in 1960 while breaking into a woman's house, DeSalvo acknowledged that he was the Measuring Man. From the Green Man to the Boston Strangler, Albert DeSalvo was sentenced to 18 months in jail for his crimes as the Measuring Man. He served just 11 months before being finally freed for good behavior. After his release from prison, he vanished from the police's view. Showing the final victim of the Green Man, police linked DeSalvo to the murder after receiving the woman's report, and they even got his picture printed in the newspaper. Soon after, a number of additional women came forward to name DeSalvo as their attacker. DeSalvo was taken to the Bridgewater State Hospital after being charged with only one assault. There, he met George Nassar, a fellow prisoner who had been found guilty of murder. In February 1965, Nassar called his lawyer, F. Lee Bailey, who became well known for his defense work on O.J. Simpson in the 1990s, asking if the Boston Strangler might be able to make some money by publishing his story. When Bailey inquired as to his meaning, Nassar informed him about DeSalvo. Albert DeSalvo recorded an interview in the psychiatric section of the hospital in which he acknowledged being the Boston Strangler. Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler, or not. Though many people initially questioned Albert DeSalvo's guilt, he eventually confessed to the rapes and murders of the Boston Strangler. First of all, despite his remarkable memory of the crime scenes, there was not a single piece of tangible evidence linking him to the crimes. DeSalvo was freed from his first prison term just weeks before the first Strangler homicide, so his timeline matched with the Boston Strangler murders. Yet, he seemed like the kind of person who would have admitted to the murder spree upon his original capture. According to forensic psychiatrist, DeSalvo was a very clever, very smooth, compulsive confessor who desperately needs to be recognized. DeSalvo was able to provide enough detail about each crime, whether or not he committed them for his own attorney, to be assured of his guilt. However, many police and prosecutors thought DeSalvo's confession was a fraud. Despite their desire to get the case closed, Albert DeSalvo was imprisoned in 1967 for his crimes related to the Green Man, but he was never tried for the Boston Strangler crimes. After escaping prison for a brief period, he was moved to a maximum security facility a few years later. There are many who believe Nassar is the true Boston Strangler and that he persuaded DeSalvo to confess to the murders in exchange for a portion of the money he would make from the media attention. According to Elaine Sharp, who represented DeSalvo's family, even when Richard, his own brother, went to see him, Nasser was always there and Albert wouldn't speak without his permission, the Guardian was informed. During one of Richard's visits, his brother leaned toward him and asked, "Do you want to know who the real Boston Strangler is? He's sitting right here." Nasser's face turned to stone. Sharp says, DeSalvo died from knife wounds in his cell in 1973. No one was ever able to identify his killer or killers. It looked like no one would ever truly solve the Boston Strangler case after Albert DeSalvo passed away and there were no further leads. The Boston Strangler case solved after decades. For 46 years, the Boston Strangler case stayed unresolved. Apparently, there were no more victims. Then the cops made a breakthrough in 2013. Police were able to connect Albert DeSalvo to Mary Sullivan, the 19-year-old victim of the Boston Strangler, by using DNA discovered on a water bottle that belonged to DeSalvo's nephew Tim. A blanket covering Sullivan's body contained semen that matched almost exactly with the Y-DNA, or genetic material passed down through the male line in families, found on the bottle. Following the discovery of the Y-DNA match, authorities were granted authorization to remove Albert DeSalvo's remains and collect a DNA sample. They were relieved that it was a match. Mary Sullivan's case was closed when Albert DeSalvo was declared the killer by the authorities after his death. However, the identities of the remaining 12 Boston Strangler victims are still unknown because no DNA was found to match their cases. Because of this, the Boston Strangler case is still pending today. Friends, this was the chilling true story of Albert DeSalvo, the career criminal who confessed to being the Boston Strangler. Viewers, what you can say about him, please tell me in the comment section. Friends, if you like this video, please like the video and subscribe my channel for more amazing videos, and do not forget to press the bell icon. Take care of yourself, and I meet you in a new video.